Attention! The 2025 Bahrain Grand Prix has left us with an earthquake in Formula One. Controversial penalties, altered strategies, and a Leclerc taking center stage amid internal tensions at Ferrari. What's really going on? We'll tell you everything now. The 2025 Bahrain Grand Prix hadn't even started yet and was already mired in controversy. Qualifying, which normally determines the starting order, ended up being the scene of one of the most controversial decisions of the season. Mercedes drivers George Russell and Kimi Antonelli were penalized for an action that many consider a simple confusion, while others see it as a clear violation of the rules. It all happened during the second round of qualifying, known as Q2. Esteban Ocon suffered a serious accident that forced the stewards to wave the red flag. At that moment, all teams stopped their cars in the pits as protocol dictates. However, the problem began when an unexpected message appeared on the timing screens: expected restart time. This type of message is unusual and doesn't definitively indicate when the session will resume. It was then that the Mercedes team made a risky decision. They decided to place Russell and Antonelli at the end of the pit lane before race control officially authorized the restart. Why did they do it? Because in Formula One, arriving first at the end of the pit lane means having a clear track when the session restarts. It's a strategic move. But this time the move cost them dearly. The FIA deemed Mercedes to have violated the regulations by leaving before the permitted time. As a result, both drivers were penalized by losing a grid position. In sporting terms, this may seem minor, but in Formula One, one position can completely change the outcome of a race. Russell, who had qualified second, dropped to third. Antonelli, who was fourth, fell to fifth. And as an immediate effect, Charles Leclerc climbed to the front row, alongside pole sitter Oscar Piastri. The most serious issue wasn't the penalty itself, but the perception of unfairness. George Russell was quick to express his frustration, pointing out that race directions message was confusing and that it was unreasonable to penalize an action based on a dubious interpretation. We're in Q2, it's the first session. Penalize us for this? Ridiculous, he declared, visibly annoyed. The British driver even compared his situation to another recent penalty imposed on Carlos Sainz, who received a €20,000 fine for arriving late to the anthem ceremony due to a bathroom emergency. For Russell, such decisions are inconsistent and damage the sport's credibility. The penalty also highlighted a fundamental debate: the inconsistency in the application of the regulations. Many fans and experts agree that Formula One needs greater clarity in its rules, and above all, in their enforcement. For Mercedes, this decision represents more than a tactical setback. It's a psychological blow, just as the team had shown clear signs of recovery. Russell had been on a strong pace all weekend and was one of the favorites to fight for victory. Now he will have to fight from a more difficult position with dirty air, more traffic, and the pressure of having to make up ground from the start. Meanwhile, for Ferrari, the penalty was a gift from heaven. Charles Leclerc, who had finished third in qualifying, now starts with a clear track in front of him. And in modern Formula One, that can mean the difference between a defensive race or a direct attack for victory. The penalty imposed on the Mercedes drivers wasn't just a technical incident in qualifying. It was a move that completely altered the dynamics of the 2025 Bahrain Grand Prix. An unexpected turn of events that redefined the prospects of several teams, especially Ferrari, and that could have direct implications for the championship so early in the season. Charles Leclerc, originally third in the standings, was the biggest beneficiary. With Russell penalized, the Monegasque driver was automatically promoted to the front row, joining pole sitter Oscar Piastri, who topped the timesheets on a brilliant Saturday for McLaren. This change in position is much more significant than it appears at first glance. In Bahrain, the layout greatly favors the driver who starts from the clean side of the track, and that advantage now belongs to Leclerc. This means better traction at the start, greater overtaking possibilities before the first corner, and above all, the chance to lead the race from the start, which in Formula One often determines the final result. Furthermore, this change in the grid reshapes the team's strategies. Ferrari, which had arrived at the circuit with a series of technical improvements to its SF25, now has the opportunity to validate them from a privileged position. The modifications to the floor, diffuser, and rear wing, designed to improve rear stability and increase downforce, could be put to the test with Leclerc leading the race in the opening laps, with no traffic ahead, in ideal conditions to maximize aerodynamic performance. And it's not just about aerodynamics, it's about confidence. Leclerc has been clear in his statements. He knows the car isn't yet at the level of McLaren or Red Bull, but he's also confident that small improvements can make a difference if combined with a good starting position. And now he has that position. For McLaren, on the other hand, the landscape also changes. Oscar Piastri, who will start from pole, no longer has an aggressive Mercedes alongside him, but rather a more cerebral, more calculating Leclerc. This alters the psychology of the start. Piastri will have to defend himself against a driver who not only wants to win, but also needs to prove to Ferrari and the entire paddock that his decision to go his own way in setting up the SF25 is the right one. The pressure is also mounting in the Mercedes garage. Russell, who had hoped to capitalize on a solid weekend from the front row, now starts from third place, behind two cars that weren't in his initial equation. This changes his plan of attack and forces him to take more risks in the opening corners, where any mistake can cost him not only positions but even damage to the car. Pierre Gasly, who benefited from moving up to fourth thanks to Antonelli's penalty, also enters the fray. The Alpine driver now finds himself in a more competitive zone, which could lead to a chaotic start if everyone tries to take advantage of the gaps on the opening lap. The Bahrain GP has always been a circuit where the first corner is critical. A long straight followed by a hard, technical braking zone creates overtaking opportunities, but also accidents. Now, with a modified grid and growing tension between the teams, that first sector promises to be a tactical storm where mistakes are not allowed. What seemed like a simple one-position penalty has turned into a strategic bombshell. Ferrari goes from chasing to leading, Mercedes from dominating to defending, and McLaren, which seemed in control, now faces a revitalized Scuderia ready to attack. Ferrari arrived in Bahrain knowing it couldn't continue losing ground to McLaren and Red Bull. The SF25 had shown flashes of competitiveness in the early races, but it also made it clear it was lacking something essential: balance, consistency, and pure race speed. Therefore, the Scuderia made a strong commitment. This wasn't a minor change. It was a profound overhaul of the aerodynamic concept in some of the car's most critical areas. Ferrari introduced 5 technical updates for this Grand Prix, all focused on a single objective: stabilizing the rear of the car and generating more downforce. They began with a redesign of the floor, which now includes new side rails that channel airflow more efficiently toward the rear of the car. This change isn't aesthetic, it's functional. It allows for better control of turbulence and improves the efficiency of the diffuser. Speaking of the diffuser, this was the second major intervention. Ferrari modified its design to maximize the acceleration of airflow under the car. The intention is clear: to increase ground effect without compromising handling. These types of adjustments are difficult to implement mid-season because they require millimeter precision in how they interact with the rest of the aerodynamic package. But Ferrari decided to take a risk, and that speaks volumes about the current momentum. The third modified element was the floor pan, particularly at the edges. This also sought to improve airflow efficiency to avoid aerodynamic losses that were penalizing the SF25 in high-speed corners. This also has a direct impact on the car's stability when subjected to extreme lateral forces, as occurs in the fastest sections of the Bahrain circuit. The rear wing was then adjusted, specifically its pillars. A new winglet was introduced, designed to work better with the new diffuser and optimize overall downforce without penalizing straight-line speed. These types of modifications seek that perfect balance between grip and efficiency, something Ferrari had been unable to achieve in the first 2 rounds of the championship. But these improvements are not just a matter of technique. They also represent a statement of intent. In the words of Jerome D'Ambrosio, deputy team principal, the goal was not to revolutionize the car overnight, but to add small gains that, combined, can make a difference on the track. And behind these technical decisions lies a human story. Lewis Hamilton, who is in his first year with Ferrari, has been central to the development of this package. However, the improvements are primarily aimed at solving a problem he himself had been complaining about: rear-wheel instability. In other words, Ferrari is trying to adapt to a driving style that still doesn't quite fit the car. What's interesting is that Charles Leclerc has decided to take a different route. Unlike Hamilton, Leclerc has informed the team that he wants a completely different setup, more in line with his style, more aggressive and reactive. This not only tests Ferrari's ability to evolve its car, but also its ability to manage 2 opposing technical philosophies within the same team. The results of these improvements won't be evident until the race begins. But one thing is clear: Ferrari is playing an important card. And it does so at a time when Leclerc starts from the front row and Hamilton urgently needs results to justify his move to Maranello. These new parts don't guarantee victories. But if they work, they could mark a turning point in the 2025 season. If they fail, they will only increase internal tensions and external pressure on a team that cannot afford another year of promises without results. George Russell has been one of the standout figures at the start of the 2025 season. His performance in the opening races, and particularly in the sessions leading up to the Bahrain Grand Prix, showed that he is ready to fight for victories. But just when everything seemed to be aligning in his favor, an unexpected penalty forces him to completely rethink his race strategy. Russell had not only been one of the fastest during practice, but he also showed absolute dominance of the W16 in sectors where Mercedes had struggled in previous seasons. The team finally managed to capitalize on the lessons learned with the complicated ground effect concepts of previous years. In Bahrain, they had made a leap forward. The car behaved in a stable, predictable manner, and Russell was confidently pushing it to the limit. Therefore, the penalty was more than a loss of a grid position. It was a psychological break. A disruption to the momentum of a driver who had found his balance between aggression and precision. The drop from second to third, although subtle, completely changes the way he must approach the start. He no longer has a clean track. He's behind Leclerc, forced to navigate in dirty air, with Pierre Gasly very close behind, in a high-pressure zone at the start. And in modern Formula One, traffic is no small detail. It affects tire degradation, car cooling, DRS efficiency, and, above all, the ability to execute a free strategy from the start. Russell will now rely not only on his talent, but also on strategic decisions on the pit wall, timing in the pits, and his ability to maintain his composure if things don't go as expected on the first lap. The challenge is also technical. Although the W16 has proven to be more competitive, it is still a car under development. The improvements Mercedes brought to Bahrain weren't as visible as those of Ferrari or McLaren, but internally they know there's still room for improvement, especially in adapting to different types of circuits. The pace shown in Bahrain could be a mirage if it isn't consolidated with results. Russell's frustration stemmed not only from the penalty, but from the feeling of injustice. The message from race direction was ambiguous, and he acted based on the logic of decisive qualifying moments, reaching the end of the pit lane first to gain priority. There was no intention to break the rules, but rather to preempt a restart that wasn't clearly defined. The penalty was interpreted by him and by many in the paddock as excessive. But now, with the penalty already in place, Russell faces a new kind of challenge, proving he can overcome adversity. His talent is proven. His speed too. But what's at stake in Bahrain goes beyond a race. It's an opportunity to affirm his true championship contention and establish himself as the true leader within Mercedes, especially with Kimi Antonelli, who, although promising, is still in his early stages. The pressure is double. From within the team, where expectations are placed on Russell as the spearhead of the new project. And from the outside, with a tight championship and an increasingly competitive grid. In modern Formula One, mistakes are unforgivable and opportunities quickly vanish. If he can get a good start, maintain his position, and build a clean race from third place, Russell still has a real chance of fighting for the podium and even the win. But if the chaos of the first corner engulfs him, if he's trapped behind slower cars, or if his tires degrade more quickly due to traffic, then the penalty will have been the first nail in the coffin of a weekend that looked perfect. Russell has speed, talent, and motivation. But this time he'll also need composure, strategic vision, and a bit of luck. The Bahrain Grand Prix will undoubtedly be a test of character for him and for Mercedes. The 2025 Bahrain Grand Prix is not just another race. It's a key episode in a season that is being defined by details, last-minute decisions, and unexpected twists and turns that alter the entire balance of the championship. Penalties, technical updates, internal tensions, and strategic changes have transformed this round into a kind of pressure laboratory for the big teams. Charles Leclerc has an opportunity he can't pass up. Ferrari has given him new tools, but it's also given him freedom. The Monegasque driver is at a turning point. If he manages to capitalize on the grid position and the aerodynamic improvements of the SF25, it could mark a turning point. Not just for him, but for the entire Scuderia, which is urgently seeking to return to the path of prominence. But if he fails, doubts will grow and tensions with Hamilton could intensify in an environment where stability has never been the strong suit. At the other end of the spectrum, George Russell faces the kind of challenge that defines races, seasons, and sometimes professional careers. After being penalized in a decision as controversial as it was decisive, he must prove he can overcome adversity. Mercedes trusts him, but also needs immediate results. The car seems to have taken a step forward, but the pressure of not capitalizing on it can become a burden. And then there's Oscar Piastri, the pole sitter. A young talent facing a grid full of experienced drivers, constantly evolving cars, and a first corner where any mistake can destroy an entire strategy. McLaren is leading the championship, but knows the competition is fierce and there's no room for complacency. The context of the championship doesn't allow for relaxation. Lando Norris and Max Verstappen are separated by just 1 point, and any position gained or lost in Bahrain could make the difference in the final outcome of the season. It's not just about a victory, it's about staying in the fight. This Grand Prix is a reflection of what modern Formula One represents: technology at its limit, millimetric decisions, and drivers who must combine instinct with calculation. Bahrain has exposed the strengths and weaknesses of all the protagonists. It has revealed the internal fractures of the biggest teams and provided space for new narratives to emerge. Now, it all comes down to what happens on Sunday. Under the desert lights, with engines at their limit and the pressure at its peak, much more than just a single race's points will be decided. Key championship positions, reputations, and even the immediate future of some projects on the grid will be at stake. What seemed like just another qualifying session ended up becoming one of the most tense and unpredictable moments of the year. And the real battle is just beginning.